So there are two ways to create content. Create and document. Let's talk about creating first. Music videos are creating content. Creating content is essentially what I'm doing right now. I planned it out, I outlined it or scripted it, depending on how you roll, or your storyboard, depending on it. Anything that's planned, scripted, that takes time out of your day to plan out a shoot day, that is creating content. It kind of creates a disturbance, in a sense, from your regular workday, which is one of the reasons why certain clients of ours lack content, is because they don't have the time to sit down and create content unless they have a team with themselves. The pros about this is that the content can be a little bit higher quality, especially if you guys have to book a studio. The content can be more succinct, can be more concise. The messaging is more on point instead of someone who's trying to try to riff and go off the cuff like me right now. The cons is that it can be time consuming. You have to take the time out of your day to plan out your ideas, to write it out, to book the studio, to get the right people to film for you to film it in general. And after filming, the content can potentially become redundant because it's the same message, it's the same location. There's no real variety, which makes this part a little bit hard to work with when it comes to executing our content strategy. But if you're creative, you can make it work. And then not only that, you also have to do it again. The next way you can create content is documenting instead of creating. Gary Vee really made this super popular in documenting instead of creating. I've honestly been doing it since 2003 when I got my first handheld camera, just filming everything, documenting everything I possibly can. And I used to edit on VHS tapes prior to Premiere, but anyways, I digress. So the beauty of documenting is that you don't need to plan. It's very raw. It's almost like creating a reality TV show at your call. Very similar to Snapchat. Snapchat, it's like 10 times more raw because, you're filming it at that moment. With documenting, it's raw in that sense, but you have the flexibility to do post-production, add some lower thirds, add some animations, you can add some music if you wanted. And you don't exactly have to plan out a shoot day, because every day is a shoot day if you want it to be. Documenting doesn't necessarily mean you have to start vlogging. You don't have to necessarily go to the extent of a Peter McKinnon or a Casey Neistat or even a Gary Vaynerchuk. You don't have to document every single second of your day. So document the parts that are important and the parts that you think aren't that important, and I'll explain. Document the parts that are important, meaning say you're in a meeting and you might share some business advice that might be directed at that person, but that advice itself can be helpful for someone else. So, and then all you'd have to do is just cut it up real nice, make sure there's no private information that gets out. And when I talk about the things that aren't important, the day-to-day stuff, that can be things like, for me, when I'm doing dance, I think rehearsals can be boring as hell because there's a lot of standing, waiting, and just practicing the dance moves over and over. The people who've never been in that realm, who've never stepped foot inside a rehearsal, that can be interesting to them. That can be interesting content for you to share. And if you can wrap it up in some sort of message, that can be a pretty powerful piece of content. So when it comes to that, like in terms of documenting the important and non-important things, what are things that you think are boring, like how you like a customer service call. Some people might think that's boring, but if you happen to have a conversation with a really difficult customer and you handle it like a pro, that would be pretty interesting to watch, because people who are trying to improve their customer service skills, that might be something super helpful, because then they see you, and we learn by example. Monkey see, monkey do, in a sense. Pros of this is there's no scripting. You don't necessarily have to outline anything. You can, if you want to, kind of like outline, like if you know your day, you think about the certain things you want to film and what you don't want to film. The last thing you want to do is just film nothing. If you know what your day is going to entail, it helps to kind of have an idea and just be flexible, because when you start documenting, there's a lot of stuff, there's a lot of unknown variables that you're going to run into. So be really, really flexible with that. Again, pros, no scripting, and because there's no scripting, it can capture very real moments. And sometimes, if you've ever had those moments where you share some piece of advice that really was profound, and if you've ever thought, like, damn, like that was some deep shit, like I should have filmed that. Because you're documenting, you'll then be able to share that profound moment with everyone else on social. So along with that, you don't necessarily have to chunk in this time in the middle of your day. You're just going throughout your day and just happen to be filming it. Whereas if you're creating, you would have to stop everything you're doing, make time to film, just like what I'm doing right now, and then go back to the rest of your day. With documenting, you just so happen to be going around your day and a camera happens to be there. And another pro is that it gives you a whole lot of content to work with. If you're going from one place to another, that's like multiple video shoots and photo shoots. For me, if I had a really busy day, it would be going to a meeting, hanging out with my son, phone meeting, and then another meeting. So then that's several different locations. And if I'm mindful enough to be able to set my camera at the right place, I can get a good vlog. I can get some good audio content, potentially use it for a podcast. I can use it, get really nice clean images. And that's for each potential location I just mentioned. Rehearsal space looks different from the first meeting, looks different from me hanging out with my son, looks different from the second meeting I go to. So that just by filming your regular day, you create a lot of content. So the cons of this is that it can be pretty time consuming because there's so much content to sift through, and unless you have an editor who can do all that work for you to look for the best moments to create all these pieces of content, you've got to chunk some time into the editing process. Either way, if you're a solopreneur and doing all your own editing, you're gonna have to edit all this content on your own unless you have your own small team, which is essentially what I did at first. I'm creating a lot of content, creating a lot of micro pieces of content, and then just dispersing it through all different social channels. So if I had to choose between creating and documenting, I wouldn't, because I like both. There comes a time to create and there comes a time to document. There have been many times in the middle of me vlogging and documenting where I have a 20 to 30 minute window, or even a little longer, where I can actually fit in a Q&A episode, which is essentially what a lot of my Q&A episodes are. I have some downtime. I don't have a whole lot to do, like a tutorial or anything that's in depth, so I do a Q&A episode, and each that becomes one piece of content, and then like each Q&A episode becomes a separate episode in itself, because that obviously leverages SEO, but some people just aren't going to watch that entire episode and they just want to see that question answered right off the bat. Getting a little bit ahead of myself in terms of, creating micro content. I just love creating content that helps people, and it kind of gives me a little shot of adrenaline and excitement whenever I see people enjoying the content. And the feedback that I get from you guys or from the people that I work with is what excites me.